And the hate crimes against his church and his community didn't deter him at all from reaching the pinnacle of football. He stayed focused while at the same time making a lasting impact on the racial climate in our country. During the game, there's this really funny story. He goes to his coach. They started out kind of sluggish, and he goes to his coach, and he's like, "Man, my legs just aren't there. Like I don't have the energy. I'm really struggling." And the coach looks at him and quotes Isaiah 40:31. He says, "Those who trust in the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not be tired. They will walk and not faint." And Reggie then goes out and sets a Super Bowl record with 3 sacks after that moment.
That's cool.
Which is pretty awesome.
I said it's great to be a Tennessee Vol.
I said it's great to be a Tennessee Vol, and it's great to be here on the For My Dogs podcast with my dog Johnny, who just introed us in with "It's great to be a Tennessee Vol" chant. You love to hear it. Johnny, tell the people why you had to do that to open the podcast.
I just threw up in my mouth. I just want to apologize to all of my fellow Georgia fans, but I will say I'm a man of my word.
Yes, you are.
Tucker and I made a friendly wager on the Tennessee-Georgia basketball game, and I even texted him, and I said, sure, I'll make this wager, even though I know I'm going to be the one doing it, because I knew that we were not going to win that game. It was close in the first half.
Yeah, and then it turned into a 30-point blowout.
But
I'm glad my Vols pulled through and beat you guys, because we turned around and lost to Vandy on Saturday. And so, they pulled through when I needed them to, unlike the football team this year. So I'm glad I got a little, revenge for having to wear all those Georgia clothes back during football season.
Yeah.
But, you guys were coming off of 2 ranked wins. Anything could have happened.
We almost beat Auburn, and Auburn is number 1 right now. And it was like a 2-point difference. And so, you know what? Maybe I'll start watching basketball. I'm not a big basketball fan, but
maybe we've got you hooked.
Maybe you got me hooked. Yeah, we'll see. But hey, when this podcast airs, it will be the Natty will be playing on Monday night.
Yep.
And hopefully,
which is kind of sad, because that means college football's over.
It's over. I know.
And that's depressing.
It is.
Moment of silence. Moment of silence for college football going away. Thank you, college football.
All right, moment's passed. Now, hopefully this is the best game of the playoffs.
I hope so.
That's I think that's the plan that people have said, and I need it to be. And I have tomorrow off because of MLK Day, and there's a chance, because in the school system, if it's like a certain temperature, then the schools are delayed. And so I could watch the national championship and then go to school later. So it would just be a great weekend for me.
Yeah.
But I said this before on the last podcast, is that I want Notre Dame to win, even though I think Ohio State is favored. Actually, I know they're favored.
Yeah. Well, and you want Notre Dame to win for the same reason I want Ohio State to win. You want your team to have lost to the champion.
Because even though Georgia's not in it, we're still in it.
No, you're not. That's not how it works.
It is, because if it makes our loss look so much better if they win all the way.
Oh, Johnny, you're not used to being in the losers club, and it shows.
Hey, don't do that. Georgia was there for a long time. But
not in recent history.
Speaking of recent history, this is not 100% true, but there are rumors that Mike Bobo might be retiring for quote-unquote health reasons. And whatever the reason is, I hope you're doing well, Mike Bobo, but I hope you're doing well somewhere else. And it is not 100% fact, but goodness gracious, if that is true, it'll be a great
doing
season.
Some reporting on the For My Dogs podcast?
Yeah, maybe. It's come a long way, but I've heard some rumors. But again, they are
people
rumors.
Are starting to murmur.
Yeah.
Name what movie that's from.
I don't know.
Come on, you know. It's a Will Ferrell movie.
Is it Other Guys?
It is The Other Guys. Good
Yeah.
job.
Do a desk
Well
pop.
done.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so Notre Dame, Mike Bobo leaving for you guys after losing Carson Beck too. That would just be like best case scenario of what you've been asking for all season.
It's so funny though, because people are like, this is so sad. And I was like, what fan are you? You're obviously not a true fan, because these are the best times ever. Carson Beck leaving and Mike Bobo leaving. That's Christmas morning to me if that happens. Or if Mike Bobo leaves, yeah.
Yeah. We'll see what the Bulldogs look like next year. I think both of our teams are going to be coming in with a little bit of unknown. You guys will have new face at quarterback and potentially a new face offense coordinator. And we're going to have a lot of familiar faces. Like, we're not losing a lot on defense. We still have Nico. Biggest question marks for us are going to be, how are the wide receivers going to do? And how's the offensive line going to do? Those are going to be two biggest things I'm watching for next year. So both of us have some question marks, some unknowns going into next year. But you know what's not unknown is who's playing in the Natty tonight by the time this recording drops. And that is Ohio State and Notre Dame. They have cemented themselves as the two best teams in college football this year. And I personally don't see Notre Dame having a chance winning this game. Now, and I'm not just being biased because we lost to Ohio State. I truly, I've watched every single playoff game, and I think Ohio State has looked like the best team. Because even when Notre Dame played y'all and Notre Dame played Penn State, they didn't look like dominant from start to finish. They had some weaknesses. They had some times where they didn't look great. But, Ohio State up until the Texas game was just, flawless. They were doing everything right, just running through Tennessee and Oregon. And then in the Texas game, it was going to be that way. And then they kept shooting themselves in the foot with penalties. And I don't think they're going to do that again in the national championship. I think they're going to clean that up. And Notre Dame, I think their running back is still a little banged up, and he's a big part of their offense. I mean, they really don't throw the ball all that much. It's all built around the run game. And Ohio State in all three playoff games has done a phenomenal job stopping the run. So that's my take on it, Johnny. I don't know. I know you're wanting Notre Dame to win, but from a football perspective, how do you see the game going?
Ohio State's quarterback is a dog. And when he was playing in the game, and it was his non-throwing hand, but he had this huge welt on his hand, and he was still, I'm fine. Let's keep going. He just fought through that injury. However, I think they're both really fast football teams, and so I do think that this will be a powerhouse game. I think Ohio State's favored by 8 points or something like that. But here's my thing is that, and I said this before, Ohio State, Ryan Day, the coach, was threatening to be fired. This was up until the playoffs. Everyone was saying this is their worst season. And I don't know what's happened. What I'm hoping for is that they go back to old habits. Because up until then, they haven't, no one was talking about Ohio State, and just now. Now, that's college football. That's why we love it, because it can change on a dime. I'm just saying that mistakes are bound to happen. And I think if any team is going to challenge that, it's going to be Notre Dame. I love Notre Dame's coach. He, not only is he being able to take his team, but he's a smart coach. He can actually do some has some really good trick plays, and unfortunately he used that against Georgia. Again, I don't agree with them, but they worked. So I think this will be a fun game to watch. I'm excited to watch it. I am sad this is the end of college football, though.
Yeah, very sad. Very sad. But I agree with you. I like Marcus Freeman a lot. And here's the thing. I hate Ohio State. I've never wanted them to win.
I hate both teams.
Don't see. Yeah, I honestly, me too. I hate both teams. I don't see anybody beating Ohio State the way they've been playing the past couple of weeks.
And I'm tired of this Big Ten talk about bashing on SEC and saying Big Ten's better. So it would if Notre Dame wins, that means that there's no conference better than SEC because they're not in a conference. So do a little wordplay on that. And I don't want a Big Ten victory. That's my thing. I do not want a Big Ten victory.
Yeah, I don't either. But I also don't want Notre Dame to win.
Yeah.
Because I'm also against them not being in a conference. So
Yeah.
it's whatever. I mean, but championships are fun, man. You know, we'll have the Super Bowl coming up here in a little bit. We got the national championship tonight. And so, Johnny, why don't you tell the people, speaking of Notre Dame and champions, what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so I mean, we had this planned already, but this was, no matter what today's one, was going to be hard to follow last week's episode. You know, because again, just like thanking my dad for sharing his story, and people love stories. I think we've noticed that when people share stories, they love them, and with the national championship coming up, everyone loves a victory story as well. And so Tucker and I have done our own research, and we haven't shared it with each other about players who were champions in the game, but also they were champions off the field as well, and they were just, dare I say, dogs on and off the field. Yes. And so for my guy, who I've picked, is good old Timmy Brown.
Does he go by Timmy?
He does not. He goes by Tim. His mom calls him Timmy.
Good job, Johnny.
Yes,
you just offended him.
I already offended him. However, Tim Brown, he played for Notre Dame. And let's just read his stats real quick from Notre Dame. He had 137 receptions for 2,493 yards. It's a school record of 5,024 all-purpose yards and 22 touchdowns. And he played there in 1984 through 87. And it's really cool. I just finished his book called The Making of a Man. And it's a really good book. I listened to it, and I'm counting it as my first book of the year. My goal is 10 books this year.
Hey,
so
good job.
Already done with number one. It's a very small book. And, you know, Tim Brown, if you ever want to come on here and talk about it, I would love to talk more about it with you. But yeah, it's a really good book. He shares a story with it. And I just kind of want to just like highlight his story and other interviews that I have listened to with him. And it's funny, he starts the book off by talking about his like first time at Notre Dame, and when he's going on the field and they're telling him, all right, man, you're going to start this game as a freshman. And he's walking out, and he's walking to the field and forgets his helmet. It's in the locker room. First time, he has jitters, and then he plays. He played more for kickoff return, and he catches the ball, starts running, and drops it and fumbles it, but does not realize that he fumbles the ball and keeps running. I think his nerves were just like overpowering to him. He didn't realize until everyone was running away from him that he realized that he fumbled the ball. So, you know, every hero has their origin story, and Tim Brown didn't start off as the best. You know, he started off, but I think that was more for like nerves.
When was this? When was he at Notre Dame?
So we started at 84. Freshman year is 84.
84.
Yes. So then in 86, the famous Lou Holtz joins Notre Dame. And so Tim Brown was at Notre Dame before Lou Holtz. And when Lou Holtz gets there, he has no idea why they haven't started this guy, Tim Brown. He's so confused why. And so the previous coach, I guess, didn't like Tim Brown as much. And Lou Holtz is telling him, you're going to be one of the best players in the country. And Tim Brown does not believe him at all. He was like, there's no way. And
where's your Lou Holtz impersonation? Come on.
I do my Lou Holtz. You got it. You can do if you want it.
If you want to see Ty Schmidt on here to do that.
If you want to see a good one, go on Pat McAfee's show. But yeah, so Lou Holtz is believing him. And he says, like, every day after practice, Lou Holtz is telling him all the good things that he's been doing and trying to get him to be the best. And in this book, like Tim Brown saying, I just don't believe it. I think I'm just a normal like football player. I'm not like, this guy's crazy. It's not until he starts getting the Heisman talk for him. And so this is I believe his senior year in 87. And in the middle of the season, it's pretty confirmed that he is not only in the running for Heisman, but he's probably going to get Heisman. And it's super cool because his buddies on the entire team are like, okay, Tim, how can we help you get this Heisman trophy? And he says, the best way you can help me is by never mentioning it until the end of the season. I don't want to talk about the Heisman. I want to focus on each game. And so he was like, let's focus on winning each game. let's not focus on the Heisman because that will eventually help me, but I don't want to get a big head with this. And so it's super cool that, in like today's time, you have players who are doing the Heisman pose after touchdowns, and they're just going on and they're showboating around. But this guy was very humble about it. He was like, I don't want to talk about it. And he eventually does win the Heisman in 87. Unfortunately, he does not win the national championship. It's not until the year after where he leaves in 88 that Lou Holtz takes Notre Dame to win the Natty. And I think that's the last time they've won the Natty.
It is.
Since then. So yeah,
88.
so the year after he leaves, well, he wins the Heisman and he comes home, to Dallas. And his mom has this huge banner for him. And it says, like, welcome home. And she says, Timmy Brown. I feel like Timmy and I can be friends. Welcome home, Timmy Brown. And it says 87 Heisman champion. And it says he pulls into the driveway and he's like super cocky. And his mom says, hey, do you see all this stuff on this banner? And I like everything. And he goes, yeah, thanks for doing it. And she goes, do you see where it is? And he's like, yeah, it's outside. She was like, yes, and it's not inside. And she goes, we're going to leave all this stuff out here. We're not going to bring the talk of your Heisman victory or your football talk inside. She said, because I don't want you to get cocky and have a big head and think you're better than the people inside. Now, that's some tough love from a mom. I don't know if I would ever say that to my kids, but Tim Brown uses this, and because in this talk he shared a lot of scripture in this, and he shares Colossians 3. Let me pull it up real quick. He says, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And so his mom, he says, shared tough love with him. And he was talking about how we're all given gifts. He was given the gift of being an amazing athlete. Tucker's given a gift of being a pastor. Myself as a teacher. And if you're listening, you have a gift that God's given you, whether you realize it or not. And so he was sharing is that we don't need to use these gifts and get all puffed up and use them to glorify ourselves. We need to use these gifts to glorify God. And it's a really cool lesson. He learned it in a harsh way, but he says that helped him not get this big head in the NFL. Well, he goes into the NFL in 88, first round draft, and he goes to the LA Raiders, not the Las Vegas Raiders. And when he gets there, he talks a lot about this part in here. And I just want to give a disclaimer. This is a really good book. I wouldn't say that I necessarily agree with everything in the book, but this book is a great, just a book for men. And I don't know if I even said the name of the book, but so it's The Making of a Man. And I just want to pause right here because this is really cool. It's just read the chapter titles here. As you have chapter 1, a man uses his talents. Chapter 2, a man overcomes temptation. Chapter 3, a man takes responsibility. Chapter 4, a man forgives others. Chapter 5, a man has his priorities in order. And chapter 6, a man builds a godly legacy. So it's a short book, obviously, but just the titles are amazing. And when he gets into NFL, he says in Notre Dame and in high school, he struggled with temptations, but never to this level. He talks about how he's made the most money that he's ever made. And he says that things are just being thrown out at him. And he says he doesn't even have to ask for these temptations. They just are offered to him. And it's a huge struggle that he has with this. And it's not until he meets a rookie. He's not a rookie at the time, but he meets a rookie, and his name is Chester McLaughlin, I think. He's a D tackle, 6'3", 240, big dude. And him and Chester become friends. And even though he grew up in a Christian home, he says it wasn't until 1996 that Chester and Tim, they both were saved in 1996. And so even though he grew up in a Christian home, it wasn't until there where he was saved and he actually took his faith serious in 96. And at this point in the book, he talks about friendship, which is super cool because he says that since him and Chester both had the same ideas and they both had the same way of life, is that they held each other accountable. So he talks about accountability here. And, Tim Brown's a wide receiver, and Chester is a huge D tackle. And he says that sometimes that Chester would get in his face and would yell at him to make sure that he was not doing these things that everybody else in the NFL was doing. And even though Chester went off to go to other teams, they still would call each other. And Chester always made sure that he was treating his friends and family correctly, and he was staying on the correct path. And he talks about how Tim Brown says he never thought that Chester was judging him, that he always thought this was all out of love, because that Chester wanted to hold him to a higher standard. So this is super cool to see that. I've never heard of that before in the NFL. I'm sure that happens more than not, but it's really cool that he decides to highlight this moment. Well, then in 2002, Tim Brown and the LA Raiders go to the Super Bowl in 2002. I'm a child at this point. And they play the Bucs. And unfortunately for Tim Brown, the Bucs win the Super Bowl. Now, Tim Brown talks about this. He had a kid before, and he missed the kid's birth because of football. But after his team loses the Super Bowl, he finds out that his wife is going into labor with their twins. So he gets on a plane and flies to go meet her. And it's super cool because his wife, she delivers the twin babies, and there's someone at the hospital that comes up to him and says, "I'm so sorry for what happened today." And he's confused. He's like, "What are you talking about?" And the person asking him is even more confused that he's confused. And she was like, "I'm talking about the game tonight." And he was like, "That's already gone. I've already put that out of my memory. I'm here. My wife just gave birth to twins. I care more about this right now." And so he starts talking about priorities, how and beginning of his NFL career, he didn't really care for that. And now he made sure that he needs to care more about this. And he says, now I didn't look this up, but he says that in the 16 years in NFL, he only missed 1 or 2 practices, which is pretty cool. And again, I don't know that for a fact, but he's talked about priorities, how priorities need to be the most important thing to you, because that's what priority means. And he needs to make sure that they're all in line. And he used that in his NFL career. And I kind of want to read his NFL stats that he used that. I mean, he had his priorities aligned, and he was an amazing NFL athlete. And he led the NFL in kickoff returns in '88, so his first year there. He led the NFL in punt returns in '94. He led the NFL in receptions in '97. He played in 9 Pro Bowls, Super Bowl in 2002, and he still leads the Raiders as the all-time receiver. And now he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so he was a man on and off the field, and he practiced that on the field, and he also practiced that with his family. And even though he's retired now, his current stats still show that he is still trying to pursue that. It's super cool what he has now. He's a national chairman for the AEFK. It's an organization that helps teens through mentoring and through education. He also has this camp called the Tim Brown Mentor Mini Camp. It's for fatherless boys. So it's a football training camp with the emphasis on guidance and encouragement. And then he's also the author of Making of a Man. And so I know I spoke really fast, but Tim Brown is an amazing athlete, and he's an amazing person. He has his flaws. He recognizes that, and you can read more about his low points in life in his book. He's very vulnerable with that, but he strives for more each time. And the one thing that he really talks about a lot is the gifts from God. And he talks about how everyone is given gifts from God. And so I think it's really cool because we all have gifts. And, Tucker started wanting to start do this recently, and I really like this idea, is that to give our listeners a practical thing to do. And so you may know what your gift is, and that's amazing, but you may not know what your gift is. And so I would really encourage you for your practical thing for this week is every morning when you wake up, when you make coffee, is to pray, say, "God, please show me what the gift that you've given me is, and how can I use that for your glory?" And let's say you know what your gift is. Just say, "God, how can I use this gift for your glory? and please help me not use it for my own glory. And that's what he talks about, is for his glory, for God's glory, not for man's glory. So Tim Brown is an amazing person. I now look up to him. We'll have a link for his book here. It's an easy read. I read it in one day. So highly recommend, if you are trying to find something light to read and encouragement as a man, it's a great first step.
Oh, dang, Tim Brown. Sounds like an awesome guy.
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy hearing you describe his story. There's so many similarities to who I chose to highlight in today's episode. And I actually wasn't sure who I was going to do for when we first brought up doing this idea. And
There's so many.
Yeah, there's so many to choose from. And it was kind of overwhelming. But it was just a really cool, like, God thing. A lady at our church who knows Reggie White's wife, Sarah, and she knows I'm a huge Tennessee fan. So she gave, you can barely see it behind me, but right under Juwan Jennings, Mossing, Georgia, in Athens.
Okay.
There's a signed picture of Reggie White when he was with the Eagles. And so a lady at my church just like gifted that to me because she knows Reggie's wife. And I know about Reggie because he played at Tennessee and was one of the all-time Tennessee greats. And he's a defensive end. And I knew about his NFL career too, because towards the end he played for the Panthers. But I never really like dove into learning about his life. And so after receiving that picture, I was like, well, let me look at Reggie and see if there's any good things from his story that I can share. And boy, was I not even prepared for how many things there are I can share about Reggie White's life, and just how who he was as a person is so in line with what we're doing on this podcast, similar to how you shared with Tim Brown. Like, if Reggie was still alive today, he'd be all about For My Dogs, all about it. So that's who I'm going to talk about. It's Reggie White, an all-time Tennessee legend. Who needs to talk about the championship teams? We're talking about the best team, which is Tennessee.
Debatable.
I'm just kidding. But Reggie was born on December 19th, 1961 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Funny story, Johnny, you and I have actually taken a trip to Chattanooga, and we went paddleboarding down the river, and you scooped up a dead fish out of the water.
It was floating.
It was floating.
Yeah.
And you just grabbed it with your hands.
It was like Bear Grylls. It was a fun time.
Yeah, that was a fun trip. So he was born in Chattanooga. He was raised by a very strong single mother, and his early life was marked by financial struggles and other types of adversity. However, despite that, he was able to discover football at a young age, and it was clear early on that he was excelling on the football field. To Tim Brown's point, Reggie had a gift, and it was for playing football and playing really well. And he also put his faith in Jesus at a very young age, and that became a cornerstone of his life, even that early. So much so that he felt a call to ministry at the age of 12, and then was ordained as a pastor at the age of 17. So again, I did not know any of this about Reggie White, but then the more I was researching his story, I was like, I'm loving this guy more and more every second. I was like, we're both pastors? That's incredible. So he became a pastor at 17, and that's why, if you've ever heard of his nickname, when he was in college, it became really popular, but they called him the Minister of Defense. I was like, that is the coolest nickname. And then Reggie decided to play football in college at the University of Tennessee in 1980, and he slowly but surely worked his way up to being one of the best players on the team and even in the country, which earned him the honor of being team captain in 1983. And so it's actually interesting because him and Tim Brown were playing around the same time, and we didn't.
You said what year again?
That. 83 is when he was team captain. That was his senior year. So it's not, there was probably some overlap when they were in the NFL.
Yeah.
But that 83 season was by far Reggie's best. He broke the record for sacks in a single season at Tennessee at 15. And I actually remember when that record was broken in, I think it was the 2015 season. It got broken. Derek Barnett broke Reggie White's sack record. But anyways, he was a game wrecker that season, earned himself the honors of All SEC and All American. And in his time at Tennessee, he stayed heavily involved in the church and in his faith. So he spent a lot of his time there at Inner City Church and in the streets of the inner city of Knoxville, mentoring young men who were involved in gangs, meeting the needs of the homeless, really pursuing social justice in the community of Knoxville during his time as a player. So it goes back to what we were saying earlier about these guys, winning on and off the field. And he was always serving and giving of himself despite his growing fame as a player. And then, after his career at Tennessee, Reggie began playing professionally, first in the USFL with the Memphis Showboats, which is they've actually been resurrected as a team. They're part of the spring league, the UFL. They're a team again. So, but he was with them for one season, had a lot of success there, and then joined the Philadelphia Eagles in 1985. So the picture back there is him in an Eagles uniform. And while with the Eagles, they had some really good teams and a lot of really talented, exceptional defenses. However, they just couldn't win the big game. They never made it to the Super Bowl, lost big games in playoffs. And Reggie believed it was because a lot of the guys would miss OTAs and training camp because they were negotiating contracts, trying to get more money. And I was listening to a podcast where it was NFL Films did an interview with him, and he was just saying how because guys were just trying to get more money and weren't focused on what we needed to do as a team, it hurt the team chemistry in the long run. He felt like that was the reason why those very talented Eagles teams never went all the way and went to the Super Bowl, which I thought was it's cool that he has that perspective and has the commitment to his teammates to say, I'm not in this for money. I'm here to win and to be the best player I can be. So I'm going to be here with my teammates. After the 92 season, Reggie became a free agent, and I loved listening to him explain his whole free agency process because this dude just went about it in such a different way than what I feel like a lot of players today go about it. He took it very seriously. He didn't rush the process. He spent a lot of time in prayer, trying to listen to the Lord's voice of where God wanted him to go next and what team he wanted to go. And he thought he was going to end up in San Francisco. It was looking like it was San Francisco most of the way. And then the Green Bay Packers kind of entered the picture out of nowhere. And while he was praying about the decision between the two teams, this is so cool. He felt like God was telling him to go to Green Bay, not just for football reasons. So as he was praying, he said he felt like God telling him, Reggie, the defensive coordinator from San Francisco's at Green Bay now. And there were a few other coaches from San Francisco that had gone to Green Bay. And, Reggie's rehashing all this and he's like, okay, well, I wanted to go to San Francisco mainly because of the coaches. They're all at Green Bay now. So God was pretty much you're still focused on San Francisco, but just look at what has happened. I've moved these guys to Green Bay, and you need to go to Green Bay because you need to do work in the inner city there. And so not only did Reggie choose Green Bay in free agency because of football reasons, but he also followed the leading of the Lord because he knew he needed to be there for off the field reasons. There was ministry that needed to be done that the Lord was calling him to. And I just think that's such a cool way to make a decision like that. While he was in Green Bay, he and his wife still had a house in Knoxville, and they stayed connected with Inner City Church, the church that I mentioned earlier there. And in 1996 is a sad story, but Inner City Church was actually burnt to the ground, and whoever did it had spray painted a bunch of racial slurs on the doors and walls of the church. So it was a hate crime. And this actually wasn't the only attack like this that happened in Knoxville or around the country at that time. This was actually kind of popping up, and these were happening at a bunch of different locations. And so, it's kind of fitting. By the time this episode drops, it'll be MLK Day, which is a just monumental figure of the civil rights movement. But you look at even years later after MLK, the still racial tension that existed in our country and even in a city like Knoxville. And there was a wave of these types of attacks on African American religious institutions and Knoxville had more than one. And it's believed that Reggie's church was actually targeted because they weren't just a congregation of African Americans, but it was actually a very diverse congregation. So they had people of all different kinds of races worshiping there, which they believe that's part of why it was targeted. And the racial tension in Knoxville just was high at this time, so much so that when Reggie and Sarah moved into, like the day they moved into their new house there someone had laid a wooden cross up against the front of the house. And that's typically a sign that the KKK uses. So it's likely that a KKK member put it there knowing that Reggie and his wife Sarah were moving there. So that had to be a very scary time for them. And after this attack on Inner City Church, Reggie just used his platform in the NFL to bring awareness to all the hate crimes happening, not just the ones in Knoxville, but all across the country. He didn't think that they were getting dealt with as much urgency as if it would have been on a white church per se. He didn't feel like it was getting the publicity that other things were getting in the news. And so he took it upon himself to advocate for more coverage of these and more investigations into what was happening. And he really took on this passion for civil rights and for social justice. And he used his platform for that. And he was able to bring awareness not only to the crimes happening in Knoxville, but all across the country, so much so that it drew the attention of the FBI and of Bill Clinton, who was president at the time. And so they got involved with this investigation at Inner City Church while Reggie continued advocating using his platform. So during the course of the investigation, there's a really interesting part of it. There was a 30 for 30 podcast I listened to about this whole investigation. It's a wild story. But at one point, the pastor of Inner City Church, who Reggie was very close to, actually was listed as a suspect. They were trying to say that he burned the church down on purpose to get the insurance payout, because they had this whole program where they tried to help low-income families become entrepreneurs and become business owners. So they would like loan out money to help get them going so people didn't have to go through a bank. And there had been they had struggled with the funds for that. And so the theory was he burned the church down because they needed money to keep that ministry going and to get a new building or whatever. And so this was really tough on Reggie because Reggie was close to the pastor, and it made it look even worse because later on that pastor got arrested for cocaine. And so, yeah, which is wild.
Okay.
So he spent some time in prison, but this is who Reggie is, though. Reggie, even when that happened, still went and visited this pastor often while he was in prison and just showed so much grace and compassion towards him. And the pastor of Inner City, he was never convicted for arson of the church. And sadly, Reggie passed away without knowing whoever did it, and which is unfortunate. I'm sure he would have loved to have seen justice happen, but unfortunately he wasn't able to. So that fire happened in 96 while Reggie was still with the Packers. And in an incredible redemption story, Reggie was able to win a Super Bowl with the Packers that following year in 97. I just think that's so cool, like the timing of it. And the hate crimes against his church and his community didn't deter him at all from reaching the pinnacle of football. He stayed focused while at the same time making a lasting impact on the racial climate in our country. During the game, there's this really funny story. He goes to his coach. They started out kind of sluggish, and he goes to his coach and he's like, "Man, my legs just aren't there. Like I don't have the energy. I'm really struggling." And the coach looks at him and quotes Isaiah 40:31. He says, "Those who trust in the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not be tired. They will walk and not faint." And Reggie then goes out and sets a Super Bowl record with 3 sacks after that moment.
That's cool.
Which is pretty awesome. And after the game, he gave all the credit to Jesus when he was interviewed. And going into the game, he talked about the opportunity he had to continue to use his platform, not just for racial and civil rights reasons, but also to promote his faith in Jesus. And so going into the game, he said, they're going to have to listen to me now. We're in the Super Bowl now. They're going to have to listen to me. And so that was just a really cool redemption story, to go through all that adversity and see people he loved in his church community go through that, and then to come out the next year and win a Super Bowl and set a record in the Super Bowl. And after his time in Green Bay was done, it's actually really cool. He played for the Panthers for a little bit, so he moved here to Charlotte. And then he wasn't with the Panthers long before deciding to retire. But when you look at his career as a whole, Reggie made it such a priority to mentor young players and take them under his wing. He was constantly doing this throughout his career. Every team he was at, every locker room he was a part of, he was there for the younger guys, supported them, wanted to make sure they got what they needed to be successful in the league. And he was very open about his faith in the locker room. A lot of stops on his journey. He was able to start Bible studies with a lot of the guys and other players. And Chris Carter, who's regarded as one of the greatest receivers of all time, to this day talks about the impact that Reggie White had on him when they played together. And if I remember correctly, Chris Carter had an estranged relationship with his father, and Reggie White was like a father figure to him. And so that's pretty cool. And this is who Reggie was. Like I said earlier, he would have loved this podcast. He would have loved everything we were about, because that's what he was about. He wanted to help men become the best version of themselves, whether they played in the NFL or was a member of a gang out in the streets. He wanted those guys to become the best version of themselves and to have hope that there's something better for them. And he understood the importance of men being there for one another. And another really interesting thing about Reggie's story that I feel like is worth highlighting is that when his time in the NFL came to a close, Reggie actually began to question his faith, have some doubts. However, like a lot of people today, who they start having these doubts and then they just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, I'm done with Christianity. I'm done with church for X, Y, and Z reason. Reggie didn't do that. Instead, he hired a Hebrew teacher because he wanted to learn the original Hebrew, which is what the Old Testament was written in, because of the doubts he was having. And he even took a trip to Israel to really get back to the roots of what Scripture was all about. And even in his doubts and what many in Christian circles would call what he was experiencing a dark night of the soul, which is something most Christians go through at some point in their faith journey, where they hit a wall, they hit this period in their life where they're asking questions and having doubts. Even when he was going through that, Reggie still carried himself like a champion. He approached his doubts with the same tenacity and just getting after it, just like he did on the football field. And I just think that should be admired. I don't think we should judge people when they're experiencing doubt or wrestling with Christianity or wrestling with the Lord. Instead, we should say, yeah, you need to go through that experience, because it's either the enemy's going to win and going to push you away, or it's going to draw you closer to Jesus and you're going to love him even more as you lean in and you try and work out your doubts and learn and grow. And that's exactly what Reggie did. And so I commend him for that. Tragically, he died at the age of 43. But his story and impact lives on. His wife, Sarah, actually still lives in the Charlotte area. So I may see if who gave me the picture will tell Sarah to listen to this. And Sarah, if you do, we would love to have you come on the podcast and hear more about Reggie's life from a first-person point of view. I'm sure I left out a lot of really cool things from Reggie's story, but I think the lesson in who Reggie was is he was always giving of himself. He was a busy guy. I mean, he was the top at his position in the NFL and in college. He's in the Hall of Fame. So he dedicated a lot of time to his craft and to his game. But he always made time for other people, whether it was serving the homeless in the city or mentoring young men in the city, being a part of his church, preaching engagements. He made time for it all. And so I think for us as men, we tend to always think we're too busy to have an impact or too busy to do anything bigger than ourselves. But if someone who's at that peak of success still has the time to do those things. I think we do too. And it goes back to what you said about Tim Brown and priorities, right?
Yeah.
If we know what's important to us and we know what our priorities are, we'll make time for it.
Yeah. And like, that's what like Tim Brown is like, he talks about use your platform, because everyone has different platforms. And, going back to the story of his mom, is he was saying like everyone in there, God gave them a gift too. And they need to use that for their glory, just like you did. And so like everyone has a platform. And Tucker and I say this, I think every time we post an episode, we say this, is that if this just helps one person out, if this platform helps one person out, then we're like satisfied, and we're very happy, but we know it's going to help more. But like, what can your platform do? Can you help out one person at work, one person in your family, that maybe somebody, like me as a teacher, my platform, I may not be able to help someone like Tucker's platform as a pastor can, and vice versa. And so everyone has their own platform, and don't just look up to these guys. I mean, these guys, they're amazing men, but don't think that, well, like, they're amazing men, there's no way I can be like that. Not true. They both serve the same God, and they believe that God can use their platforms to help them out, and God can use your platforms to help you out as well.
Yeah, and as you gave a practical thing with Tim Brown, and I would say based on Reggie's story, what I would recommend is, so that you can organize your life in such a way where you can make time for serving others, I would sit down with a journal, and at the top of the page write what's most important to me in life, and just brain dump as many things as you can think of. Exercising, time with family, church, God, money could be on your list, having purpose, just start dumping all that onto a page. And then when you run out and you can't think of any more, take into a minute break, maybe get up, walk around a little bit, come back to it, keep writing more things down, and do that a third time. And at the end of it, you're going to have a pretty solid list. And what I would do at that point is take all of it. And you could do this in one sitting. This isn't something you got to do like repeatedly. Like, Johnny's was every day, get up and pray, Lord, what have you gifted me with, and how can I use it for your glory? Or if you know your gift, just, Lord, help me use my gift for your glory today. This is something you can do in one sitting. So do the brain dump in a journal, what's most important to me in life, and then look at your list and then start to try and rank them. Like, put the ones that you actually look at and you're like, yeah, this is really important to me. And if you're struggling with a few, put them side by side and say, okay, is time with family or exercising and eating healthy most important to me? And then you can pick between two, and that can help you rank ones you're stuck on. And I actually think in one of our earlier episodes, we've already talked about this, but a mentor of mine once said that we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And so I think this is an appropriate time, based on what we've covered in today's episode, to bring this back up.
Yeah. And like, I think it's also important to realize is one thing that Tim Brown was saying, like in his book, and again, highly recommend it. I think it was like, I'm not trying to make myself sound like a big reader. It was like an hour, I think. And I think an hour and a half it took me to like listen to it. But he just talks about how just keep striving for more, because we have Reggie was doubted and Tim Brown struggled with temptation. So like both these guys weren't perfect human beings. So in your process of becoming a better man, don't beat yourself up on if you have a bad day. Don't stay there, like I said before, but look up to these guys. And I also would recommend you too is like, do your own research too, because Tucker and I knew of these people kind of like very vaguely, but we never knew the depths of these people. And so like, find guys, there's guys that are willing to, that have stories, and like, it's important to find a role model. It's important to have a mentor. And that's what these guys want to give back to their community as well. And so, yeah, I just highly recommend find a mentor or be that mentor to somebody as well. I know we said that before, and I mean, we're on episode what right now, Tucker? What is this, 23?
I think it's 23. Michael Jordan.
There you go. So we might repeat ourselves. I apologize. But it doesn't mean that it's less important. It's because we said it like before, we're saying it again.
Yeah, we'll never apologize for repeating ourselves, because we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught.
There we go.
And we want to remind you that next week we're doing a Q&A mailbag episode. However, we need your participation in order for us to have anything to talk about. And so if you haven't already, send us a question you have about something we've talked about over this season, or even if we haven't talked about it, just send us a question you have, and we'll try our best to not answer it, but respond to it. See what I did there?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So send those to us. If you have our phone numbers, you can text us. If you follow us on Instagram, send us a DM. If you don't follow us, you should, because TikTok's getting banned, Johnny.
It already is.
It already is,
Went dark
there's
today.
rumors.
Or went dark on Sunday, yeah.
The people are starting to murmur that Trump is going to make an executive order to put it back in action his first day in office.
I could use TikTok being banned for a week. I think it'd be good for me.
I think it'd be good for society.
My screen time would go down.
Yep. I've thoroughly enjoyed not being on it near as much this year, so I don't think it would be the worst thing for more people to experience being without it. However, it is banned. So in the meantime, you should follow us on Instagram, _UTUGA. Go find us, follow us there, just in case TikTok is gone forever. And that will be the way you can communicate with us and send us your questions. You can also comment them on this video if you don't mind them being public to everybody. Or you can email us, formydogs24@gmail.com. You can shoot us an email of your question. But if it's easier just to comment, do that. We just want to hear from you guys. We want to talk about the things that are on your mind, that you're thinking about, that you're questioning maybe. So let us know. We want to hear from you guys. We do this for you. This is not for me or Johnny just to have a fun hobby or anything. Although it is a fun hobby, we are doing this to truly help and serve you guys. And so please take advantage of that and let us know what you want us to talk about. But we've talked about two amazing champions today. Johnny, me and you are on our way to being champions of life, I think. And our listeners are on their way. They're on their own journey of reaching the pinnacle of their life and being a champion. And so we're thankful for stories of men like Reggie White and like Tim Brown that sharpen us, that challenge us, that encourage us, that give us something to shoot for, an image, an example that we can truly make an impact in this world. And that's what I think all of us want to do to some extent. And so we're thankful for their stories. We hope we did them justice and honored them, and gave them the respect they deserve. We hope you guys enjoyed their stories. And if you want us to do more episodes like this, where we just we do our research, we share stories about really cool guys, we would love to do more of it. So let us know if you enjoyed it. Johnny, go be like Reggie today and go be a dog.
And go be like Tim Brown and go be there for your dog.